Welcome to Tsem Paranormal Zone. I'm here in North Malaysia in a island called Penang or Pulau Pinang. And it is about 5 hours drive from the capital, Kuala Lumpur. And it's an island and it's surrounded by the sea, and it's very modern, it's very advanced. It used to be a colonial town. The Japanese used to occupy this place during World War II also. Has great food here, and I've got a few very good long-time local friends, and I'm visiting here to do some paranormal shoots. Now, I am at the Shih Chung Branch School here, which has been abandoned, and there's a lot of stories involved here. This was the first 5-story private home of a very wealthy family many decades ago, before the war, of course. And in its heyday, it was the talk of the town. It was the brightest of the ornaments. And the family who lived here were very prosperous and very well known. Well, as time went on, things changed, and it became a consulate. Later on, the last became an educational school. About 20 years back, it has been abandoned. And there have been many stories by local Penangites, or people who are born and bred in Penang, who live here, that say that it's extremely haunted. And there has been paranormal teams from Hong Kong and Singapore that have visited this place. And also recently, the United Kingdom, England. And in fact, the people from England who came here to film this haunted place actually caught some spirits on footage. Now, the exact reason why this place is haunted, nobody can really confirm, but there have been many sightings according to the locals. It's part of the local urban legend. Now, it's in a big parking area, and it looks very spooky, but you have to understand, all around us is huge hotels, traffic, cars, food all around us. But in this particular place, I mean, when I'm looking right out, I can see the cars going back and forth. But when you're right here, it seems like it's in another time, in another place. And what happens when the Japanese occupied this area, the basement was said to be a holding area where local people were caught, imprisoned, tortured, beaten, and killed. So a lot of poor souls have been put to a lot of pain in this very building. And it is said also a young boy died here, a student. A couple has come here and has committed suicide. And also, most recently, a gentleman also have committed suicide inside this very building. Suicides, torture, death, unhappiness, sadness, all leave their energy and leave their imprints in a particular place. And sometimes they leave their energy there for it to be played over and over and over again. So whenever someone comes, it's almost like a theater or a movie or a DVD where the event that happened is played over and over again. It could be also the actual beings who have died in this very place. That is their last memory. That is their last recall. And they are extremely attached and sad to this place because this is where they died. This is where their body separated from their mind. So that's a very powerful kind of place for people. And those who are sensitive sometimes can feel, see, perceive, or imagine in their mind's eye something here. Well, right now we haven't seen anything happen, but it is the place of a lot of paranormal activity, apparently. But I'm going to tell you my little story here tonight. Back in Los Angeles, when I was in my teens, this great master from Tibet, Saramji, came to our residence. And he was there for about 6 months and gave a series of talks and special rites. And I was very privileged to be one of the people there to participate. And along with his entourage came a great translator. And this translator lived in Switzerland, and he came to America specifically to stay in our place to translate for the series of talks. And the translator's name was Lodre Rinpoche. And Lodre Rinpoche is fluent English, fluent Tibetan, and other languages. And he was like German. He was a very nice person, very gentle, extremely patient. And I got quite close with him. And during free times, I would kind of go in and sit with him and stay with him and hang out with him. And he told me a lot of stories. And one of the stories he told me was very interesting, because in 1959, when Lodre Rinpoche and his uncle and his friends and fellow monks were leaving Tibet due to the Cultural Revolution towards India, they had to travel for months, walking on horseback, and they went through pretty primitive, pretty harsh areas that had very little to no population, no people. So he told me of a particular place where they were very tired and they were riding for days and days and days. They were exhausted. And what happened was that he felt a tug on the bottom of his pants. And he felt somebody pulling his pants, pulling his robe, not really his pants. And he was sleepy, and he kind of made no particular note of it. And it became a little irritating, because as he was riding on the horse and they were in an abandoned area and they were just going their way, he felt someone kept pulling at his cloth wrapped around his leg, his robe. And he got irritated. He woke up because he was sleeping and riding because he was so tired. And he looked down and he saw someone walking alongside his horse. And he found that very odd, because who would be walking in such a place with them when everybody's on a horse? Nobody can walk that long and at night. So he kind of really shook himself awake. And when he looked again, the person that was pulling on him, on his clothes, around his leg area, looked up at him, and the person had a red face. No particular other distinguishing characteristics, but the person had a very bright red face, and he felt that was a sort of a spirit. He felt something was wrong. So he did his prayers, and he kind of shook his leg, and that red-faced person disappeared. Nobody know where he came from or what, but that area is said to possess a type of spirit that looks like that. So as they rode along, they came across a bridge, and you have to understand that Tibetan bridges are not like the Penang bridge or the bridges that, as we know, made of mortar and steel and concrete. But Tibetan bridges, the ones that time, were made of rope and wood. And the rope and wood would be tied together, and it would be a very narrow bridge where you would have to walk across carefully. And the wood was the planks at the bottom of the bridge, tied by the ropes on the side and suspended from one side of the valley to the other. I mean, it's very primitive. It's really back in time. It's really Indiana Jones time. I mean, if you've seen those bridges on Indiana Jones, they look like that. So what happened was, these rope plank bridges, you have these planks. And the planks, you have to walk carefully, because you have a plank, then an empty space, a plank, and an empty space, a plank, and an empty space. And that's how the bridge was. Of course, the empty space was not that big, and it could only fit one person to walk through, or one horse. So if there's someone coming the other side, you gotta back out, or they gotta back out. So it's really a narrow bridge. And so it's quite scary, and it's over a river, okay? And he told me that they had no choice, they had to cross over. So he was on his horse. And when he was on his horse and he was riding, around that area towards the bridge, he suddenly felt a weight. He felt a weight, and he felt someone riding behind him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, there is someone riding on behind him, and he can feel the person's body against his. He can feel the person sitting on the horse behind him, and he said, okay, this has got to be a spirit. So what he did was, he has an upper robe, it's called a zen, and it looks like a shawl. He took the shawl, he flipped it backwards and wrapped it around that person or being behind him and pulled it forward. And when he pulled it forward, he recited some mantras and the person disappeared. He recited some prayers or mantras. Mantras are sacred words of power, and the person disappeared. So the shawl or the Zen got pulled toward his body, and the person just completely disappeared. Then they arrived at the bridge. When they arrived at the bridge, the real drama happened. And he told me this himself, and I totally believe it, because this person's my friend, and he's a monk, and very trustworthy. So what happens when he was crossing the bridge? His horse took a wrong step, and he started feeling his horse fall over to plunge down to the river. And he says he felt himself falling, and as he was falling, he had no choice, and the only thing he can think of was his root teacher. So he closed his eyes, he held on to the reins, and he thought about his teacher, His Holiness Kyabje Trijang Rinpoche. And that he thought about his teacher, and the minute he thought about Trijang Rinpoche, he said he doesn't know what happened, but immediately the horse and him went back onto the bridge. He felt a force just go back on. He felt as someone put them back on immediately. And they continued on this journey, on this bridge. They crossed it, and they entered into Nepal and India safely. And then from there, he immigrated to Switzerland, where he lives now. And he's fine. He has a long, healthy, beneficial life. And what's amazing was, during his journey, he came across red-faced spirits that were tugging at his robes around his ankle area. He came across spirits that rode on his back, and you can feel them riding. He came across some force that when he was riding on the bridge, he almost fell. It could be just a slip of the horse's hoof, or it could be a force. But when he thought about his teacher, Trijang Rinpoche, immediately he said he felt himself being pushed, or rather, he felt himself going back on the bridge, and they were on their journey again. And I said to him, were you sleeping? He said, no, how can I be sleeping crossing a bridge? You have to hold the reins of the horse and navigate. And you have to go very carefully, because the bridge is very narrow. It's on planks of wood, tied and supported by very thick, big ropes. So I thought I'd share that interesting paranormal story with you from a great teacher from the land of the snows. Today, in front of Shih Chung Branch School, which is said to be very haunted, here in Penang, North Malaysia. Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed the story. Good night.